Hello, everyone, and welcome to Trowel Talk Live. I'm Sheila Curry, and I'll be the moderator for today's presentation. Before I introduce our speaker, I'd like to remind you that you can type any questions you might have into the chat, and where Josie Padzador will be watching for the questions and will manage the question and answer session towards the end of the presentation. I'd also like to remind you that the presentation will appear on YouTube. Nancy McDonald enjoys the colors that perennials bring to her garden and delights in seeing blooms appear from these beautiful garden friends. She's continually learning how to utilize color combinations in her garden with the goal to paint with blooms. And now over to you, Nancy.
Well, thank you so much, Sheila, and thank you for joining us again today. I call my topic Paint with Blooms, and really when I think about blooms and perennials, I think of the color perennials bring to our garden as the backbone of garden color. And it's very much a personal choice whether you want a riot of colors in your garden or a specific color scheme. So we're going to talk about painting with blooms today, and hope you enjoy. So color usually means in bloom, and I ask myself several times during the gardening season if my perennials are living up to my expectations. Are they blooming the way I expected? If not, why not? Maybe it's the location that needs to be changed. So, ask yourself if you're not getting the blooms you're expecting. It's wonderful to have a gardening journal that will help you to identify the bloom times. And if you're having any gaps, most of us start our gardening planting with favorites, right? We think of favorites from childhood, maybe memory plants from our grandmothers or mothers, and we want those in our garden, but then they may not carry us through the 3 seasons. So that's why it's nice to have a record of what's blooming. And are there times when it's just green and you would like some color? Research and come up with a plan. And every time I say plan to people, they start to think that they need some sort of a grid and something very elaborate. But when I was reading again Jean Vallot's Perennial Gardening Guide, he gave a tip at the very first part of the book from a friend of his who said to him, just stretch out your arms. And if that's going to be 4 feet or a little bit longer, depending on your height, think about putting in that area of your garden a plant that's going to bloom early in the spring, then a summer blooming plant, then a fall, and add in a 4th plant that'll give you texture or interest in that area. So it can be as simple as that, but it is nice to have a plan. And to help you with those gaps, I asked the Master Gardeners of Ottawa-Carleton to send me names of reliable blooming perennials in their gardens. So ones that would bloom in the spring before the end of June, ones that would bloom in July and August, and ones that would bloom starting in September to October. And we will have that as a handout later. And I want to thank Jillian Boyd for helping me with that. So what satisfies the eye for color and bloom in your garden? Well, repetition is wonderful. Repetition will really, it's very pleasing to the eye. And if you have the same color or the same plants being repeated, maybe in different garden beds, it tends to entice the eye and draw it around your garden. So that's a wonderful thing to do. A perception of fullness, that's very personal, but most readings you will do will tell you you need at least 3 blooming together as a minimum. And remember, most of us have mixed beds in that we have maybe flowering shrubs, annuals, bulbs. So, we may have other plants that are also giving us that perception of fullness. And then that garden design plan, you really want to have color from earliest possible right into late fall. And if you add in all the supporting cast, hopefully it's a wow for you. The average time for perennials bloom is 3 weeks. I know some might be 2 weeks, some might be 4 weeks. Right now, our blooms are having a hard time because of this heat, and they certainly are going a lot quicker. These are some that are in my garden that have a longer bloom time, and there are others, but just it's wonderful to have some of these perennials that actually will bloom longer. And so Nepeta, some of the geraniums, perennial geraniums, of course, Echinaceas, balloon flowered really does bloom a long time in my garden. I put this Sinantian, this is actually the white colored flower that's on the screen. It is a relative of dog strangling vine, and that's just goes to show you can't choose your family sometimes, because this is a very well-mannered plant in your garden that almost grows like a small little shrub with these white flowers for most of the summer if you trim it back a bit. Coreopsis, yarrow, black-eyed Susans, of course, and our stonecropper sedum. I like to also, as well as seeing perennial color in my garden, I like to see visitors being attracted to the blooms in my garden. And the Canadian Wildlife Foundation is a great website to talk about different flowers and plants that you can do. And of course, many of us are trying to include more natives in our gardens all the time. But I like to see what's coming to visit. So you want those blooms coming early and lasting right through to the fall. And you want a variety of flower shapes and sizes, because our pollinators come in different shapes and sizes. So you will get wonderful things like this happening in your garden. So other sources of color. This is the painted lady butterfly on the Heptakodium, which in my garden is growing as a multi-stemmed shrub or a small tree. And those wonderful white blooms come in September. And it is usually just covered with bees and butterflies and so forth. And then I was lucky enough to get a hummingbird moth on a monarda. So just wonderful to see these colors. So when you figure out where the gaps are, and maybe from the list of reliable perennials for our zone that you can download later, then you want to think about color and maybe design with those perennials. And the color wheel, you can Google it for sure. I just have an old painter, one from a paint store, but we think of our primary colors as very strong colors. And then some of us wanted to make choices in our garden. Maybe we want to do complementary colors together. So right now, blooming in my garden are some yellow yarrow, and I have irises as well. So I'm getting those wonderful yellow tones and purple tones and blue tones. So the complementary colors are actually quite a nice contrast, quite bold. So yellow and violets and orange and blue, for example. And I'm finding as I get older, and it's actually a part of aging, that I'm actually, for my eyes, they're less sensitive, and maybe they don't pick up the lighter colors as much. And I'm looking for those strong contrasts in my garden. Some people like to use analogous colors, so the colors that are next to each other together in a garden, and it's very, very attractive. And some people want monochromatic colors, so one color, maybe a white garden or so forth. So think of that a little bit when you're choosing colors. And I'm not an artist, and I wish times I had the artistic eye, but we can learn from artists about combining and using different colors with our perennials and so forth in our gardens. This is a nice 2-page reading. It's called Lessons from Monet's Garden. You can just Google it. It's from the New York Botanical Gardens. And I happened to go there when they were doing a show of Monet's garden with color in his plants. And I happened to also visit Giverny quite a few years ago. And the picture that's here was just taken with one of those disposable Kodak cameras. And so what are some of the things that he tells us? Well, I'll tell you a couple of things. I'm hoping that you might read it. But he would plant on a west-facing garden bed perennials or flowers that would be fiery gold or bronze, so that when the sun was setting, they would really be accentuated with those colors. He would use things like decreasing hues of the same color. So he would start with the strongest or the most bold of that color. And then as your eye would be drawn in, because there would be pastel colors behind that strong color, and that would give you depth and perspective. Lots of little tidbits, and actually this was written for the home gardener, so hope you get to look at that and maybe enjoy it. If you use color in your garden design, it can do many different things for you. Hot colors will come towards you. And so if you have a large garden space and you're wanting it to feel a little bit more intimate, maybe take some of your strong colored perennials and use those. So your reds, your vibrant purples and oranges and so forth. And then cool colors will actually draw us in. So this was José's Honorine Joubert that she gave me at one time to use in a garden presentation. And it will really draw you in, those silvery tones, those white tones, those lavenders, pale blues. That will really draw us in to an area, and are wonderful nighttime colors in a garden as well. Of course, if you have a favorite color, you will want to put this in your garden bed as well. So this is my Baptisia, and it's in bloom right now. And maybe you don't put garden whimsy and so forth in your garden, but I do. I have many different things in my garden. And here, by using a blue willow pattern teapot, I'm actually echoing the blue color in the flowers. And that's another color design trick where you are picking up the hue. Now, this may just look like a little bit of a hot mess to you. This is in my garden, and I went in fairly close with the camera. So this is in September, so I have September charm anemone growing here. And the vine actually is honeysuckle and many of the same hues, almost like an analogous type of color tone there. And I guess I wasn't thinking in the spring when I was sprinkling some of my saved seeds all around the garden. And I had put some cosmic orange cosmos seed in this empty space and not really thinking what was going to come later on in the combination. But actually, I started to really like the combination because in certain light, the center of the Japanese anemone was actually almost like an orange gold. So I've continued to do this combination. So have fun in your garden with color echo, with complementary pairings, with analogous. Maybe you want monochromatic, which we will talk about a little later. And what I do in my perennial, for moving perennials sometimes, is I'm watching in my garden what is blooming at the same time. And maybe it's ready to be divided. And I could see if I moved it, I'm going to get some real color design impact by pairing a couple of my already available perennials in my garden. I like to tuck pops of color in unexpected places. So this is my lilac hedge, bush, and it hasn't bloomed yet. And I have a little sitting area just adjacent to it. So in the early spring, I really noticed these primulas, right? The pink and the blue and the yellow with the bronze tips. And I just quite enjoy when I'm sitting there and seeing those little pops of color. And primula is one of those lovely spring perennials that if you cut it back, deadheaded at the end of its bloom period, you will often get a repeat bloom in the fall. In your garden too, it isn't always bright colors when you're thinking about painting. Our eyes do need those restful moments as well in the garden. But sometimes plants just give us so many blooms, like this Hemeracalis moonwitch, which really has a lot of ivory tones and isn't that bright. But when all those blooms are showing, it really draws my eye to it. Of course, we expect red colors like that are going to draw our eyes as well. And as well as my eyes, and that the hummingbirds are always attracted to this Crocosmia. If I have small blooms in my garden, I like to keep them close so that they don't disappear in the center of a garden bed. So this is the Tricitrus or toad lily that blooms late in, well, middle to late September into October. And it's got some lovely little intricacies, right, in the petals and the center of the flower. And it's right by my walkway going up to the front door. Otherwise, I would miss some of that beauty in that perennial. The same as going up into my back steps onto the deck. I have the Iris domestica. It's almost like I can see all those little freckles on the petals. So I do like to keep small, interesting blooms close to where I can see them. We get lots of questions about color and shade and with perennials. And these are some from my garden and probably some of the ones that you use as well. This Astilbe, often Astilbe in shade. It doesn't like dry shade. This Astilbe Rhineland, this cultivar, actually, I don't give it any extra watering, even in these really hot times. Whatever I'm doing for my garden, if I'm going to try to give that periodic watering, we don't get any rain, that's all I seem to have to do for that. So that's gives lots of color. Brunera, Jack Frost with the pretty little blue flowers. And then you're left after spring with this lovely foliage. Bleeding Hearts, always a favorite. I have it in white and pinks, as well as I have the fern leaf one as well. And we say hostas in shade. But before the hostas come up, actually, in the spring in this bed, I have Virginia bluebells, the perennial, native perennial. And of course, they go dormant. So the hosta leaves just cover up that area quite nicely. When you're planting in the garden, you have to think about your background color as well. So which one is not as effective here in my garden bed? Well, it's pretty easy to see that the white Bleeding Heart, when I planted it here and then it bloomed the next spring, I was thinking, wow, it doesn't really pop because it's, you know, this light colored fence is behind it. So it's been moved to an area where there's a lot more greenery surrounding it, and it really does pop. Whereas in the same bed further along, I have, you know, Echinacea and Leatrice and that, and they do just fine. So you do have to think sometimes of the background. Maybe that's why your perennial is not displaying as prominently as you thought it would. And there's always the color green, and actually Kermit sings that it's a friendly and cool color. When you have a monochromatic color scheme, it allows your eyes to concentrate more on the texture, the individuality of the plants. It's just very, very nice, the shape and the texture and the individuality. We wouldn't maybe notice all the differences in the hosta leaves if we had other colors mixed in there. So very restful. I took this picture at the Reeford Gardens. So just some pictures showing progression through the seasons of a garden bed. This was on May the 29th. The daffodils had finished, but we had allium, Amsonia, we had poppies. The peony hadn't bloomed yet. On the other side of the peony, though, in bloom that you can't see in this picture is the Senantium that I had mentioned, the relative of dog strangling vine, which is not a bad plant at all to have in your garden. And there's actually some purple has started in this bed for the geraniums. So some color right now. This is the same bed in August. So you can see the texture of the Amsonia leaves. You can see balloon flower. You can see Crocosmia. And you can see that there have been daylilies there, Rudbeckia, meadowsweet has bloomed. It's a big bed, so there's always something in bloom on one side, on the other side as well. I didn't have the same picture in my file off it right from my deck, but just looking here in September, you can still see the texture of the Amsonia leaves, and you can see your peony leaves. There's Helenium here and actually repeated in a couple of other areas in this garden. There's Rudbeckia. The Heptakodium is just about ready to bloom. You can see the leaves that are interesting from the Crocosmia. There's Echinacea. There's actually over on this side, there is variegated obedient plant. And if I did a wider shot, you would actually see asters in this garden as well for the fall. So lots of color, and color goes right through till October here. Other plants that you can use in October would be things like your Japanese anemones, and here's one here. And I see that I've gone over my time, so I'm not going to talk too much more, but just to mention that handout with reliable perennials for our area that should give you some, with some research to find some, maybe to fill gaps. So scroll back in the chat to find the link and open it, and you can download it. If you're watching on YouTube or on a device that you can't do that, then just send it to our Trowel Talk Live Gmail, and I will watch that and make sure you get it. So now questions.
Actually, I guess because of the particular topic that it is, not so much practical, we had only one comment saying fabulous session. But I guess I have a comment if we still have a bit of time, as there were no questions. I do remember Adrienne Clarkson, our former Governor General, saying in a talk that one color she would never have orange in her garden because she just couldn't stand the color. And maybe you want to comment on that, Nancy, how because you had a lot of orange flowers.
I do, and you can see here, like it's probably at the end of my poppies here, but with the iris, I think I like the contrast. Now, probably when I started gardening, I was looking for softer colors, and my garden is not a riot of colors everywhere. So because, as Monet said, you need to, he used green often as a neutral between as a contrast between areas where maybe the colors didn't go together, because they don't all go together. Oh. But you do need some of those restful. So I do have whites and pale colors as well, and quite enjoy them in my garden.
Actually, now I see a whole bunch of questions coming up, messages. Mm-hmm. Have you used pots of flowers for color? Well, you have.
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely. In that bed that I showed the last picture with the Helenium in that, I grow vegetables in some of my perennial gardens. So that was my garlic garden first. So after the garlic had finished, I actually put pots of nasturtiums in that area as well. So I don't grow that many perennials in pots. But I do pick perennials out of my garden sometimes to maybe to go into a pot for the summer and then back into the ground.
Yes, thank you. Okay. And somebody wants to know the common name for the Heptakodium, which is
Seven sun tree, Heptakodium myconoides. Either grows a small tree or as a shrub, and it is just on the margins of being hardy here. But you know, I've had it for several years in my garden and quite love it.
and the Cynantium aceriifolium, I think,
Yes.
the harmless relative of strangling dog vine. Will that be in your in the handout? The name?
I didn't put it in because it's not an easy plant to get. I got it years ago at outside the city at a garden, White House Perennials. That's where I got it. I'm hoping next year that I can divide it again and put it in our Master Gardener plant sale, because anytime I put it into a plant sale, it goes. And there are some people that have it, but it's just not, you know, when I look online, it'll say it's not available.
Well,
But I have it in 3 different spots. It's like, just like my rudbeckia, these high reliable performing plants and balloon flowers, I spread them around my garden because they do well.
I have one that I got from you a few years ago, and it's gorgeous. It's in bloom now. I love it.
Yeah.
What kind of primula was that you showed us?
Well, there's many different. Now, the pink one and the blue one, if you go to the grocery stores in the spring before Easter, and some of them, you often see these little pots of primulas. And actually, that's where I bought those 2. So, and they can go into your garden, and the blue one particularly, I love blue, and it's come back. I think this is probably the 5th or 6th year for me so that's where I got those. But primulas are available in most garden centers.
Okay, here's a question about somebody who has a lot of oriental poppies. What can I put in around them to help, you know, when they disappear, to fill it in, the space?
So, well, there's, probably many choices of perennials. You may even have some perennials in your garden now that you can divide. Do they die down well for you? I just have the Flanders poppy here, and it just sort of disappears, and other perennials are growing up, because like poppies are early, spring bloomers. So other perennials that are going to be blooming later in the summer, early fall, will actually fill in that space quite nicely.
Somebody is asking about hostas. When my hostas have gone crazy, and when can I move them?
Well, they're pretty tough, and you can divide them at any time pretty well, but not in a heat like this. I usually do them in the spring or fall. I guess the thing is, I remember listening to Don Budd from Budd's Garden Center. They're going to come to a certain size, and even if you divide it, it's going to come back to that size. So what I've done sometimes is if I have 2 or 3 hostas together, maybe I remove a hosta from that area and put somewhere else to make room.
Okay,
Well,
and
I'm sorry to interrupt here. We're just about out of time, so I don't know if we have time for one really quick question still.
this might be quick. In the photo near the end from September, what is the tall blue-purple flower in the back right corner? I'm not sure what that was now, but I remember it.
Just that, I'll just go back. Back.
Yes.
Oh, do you know what that is at the very back? That's actually the hydrangea flowers from the bed behind, and they've turned, the quick fire have turned to that color. Is that the one they mean?
No.
Oh no, I think it's still the balloon, still my balloon flowers.
Yeah,
Yes, they bloom a long time, and I've moved them around, and they come in different cultivars, right? Some are shorter, some are taller. I have a taller variety, and I've moved them around to different garden beds.
Well, thanks so much, Nancy. And I'm sorry if there are other questions. We do need to close off for this session. Thanks so much to Nancy McDonald for this presentation. I know from the comments it was very enjoyable, and the photos were gorgeous as well. Thanks to Josie for managing the Q&As today. And join us again next week when we will be learning about invasive plants in your flower beds with Heather Clemenson. Thanks again, and you can catch this on YouTube again. Bye for now.